What's up, Call of Duty fans? Welcome back. A little bit of a news update kind of video here for you guys, as we got some interesting news from Tommy out of Reciprocity earlier today, saying that, well, he will no longer be playing, at least for the foreseeable future, as far as we would anticipate for Reciprocity, as he's dealing with some mental health problems and some personal things that he's just going to personally take a step back. Now, this comes as a pretty big surprise to a lot of people. Tommy has been a very lovable person in the community for quite some time, but he even said himself that he's, in the recent weeks, he's been really dealing with a lot of mental struggles, and he will be stepping aside, even though he loves the game very much and has had some of the best times of his life playing Call of Duty. It just is not making sense that he's not quite there mentally to play, and it has been costing him as far as his performance, but also some environment things with the team. So, as of today, and I know a lot of speculation has been coming in talking about this team from Reciprocity, but Denz will be stepping in. He's still living in Vegas, keep in mind. He's been sitting as that sixth man since the PLQ, when Reciprocity made a swap just before Fort Worth to get Dylan into the mix, and we obviously know what Dylan was able to do during his time. Now, let's just do a small comparison. Let's bring up some stats on Reciprocity, because they have not been looking so great really since Fort Worth. You think back to what they were able to do in this last week, and it was an okay week. The 1-3 loss to Optic, the 3-2 surviving win versus Gen G, somehow they pulled that off, and then they got 3-0'd by FaZe. But the good news is, those are definitively, I would say, the three best teams in this division currently. So going into week 8, they've got Luminosity, Midnight, UYU, and Evil Geniuses. Now you're hoping, looking at that schedule, that you can win at least 2, but you would love to win 3 of those, if not find some way to win 4. But with Tommy being gone, what is that going to do to this team? They're currently only 5-11 in hardpoint since London, and at London they had a -40 hardpoint differential in score per map on average, and they were 3-7 in search and destroy since London, where at London they only averaged 3 rounds for them and gave up 5.83. They also currently overall hold the 4th worst control in the league, which is not something that you typically want to hear. So that puts things in a very interesting perspective. You go and just take a look at what Denz has been able to do. His time in the Pro League was not very long-lived. That is important to note. But he did hold himself a .88 KD, which is not so great. But of course, playing more of an SMG-style role in that kind of entry fragger style role before Dylan was in the mix, he actually had a pretty good overall rating on the stats from codstats.gg. Now, you have to put that in comparison to Tommy, who has been playing a Maddox role, and Tommy's been hitting himself at an overall of a .93 overall KD, as far as what he's been able to do total. In the Pro League, it's a little bit different. His Pro League KD is at .95. Denz's Pro League qualifier KD was at .92. So you kind of just compared that. These are essentially even swaps. The biggest thing is Tommy has not been playing very well in Search and Destroy. He has a .86 KD in Search, which is tied for the 15th worst in the league out of 80 players, which is not what you want to see. But for Reciprocity in specific, you need to be considering a lot of different things. So you take a look at the squad as it stands right now, and you've got, of course, Zed and Dylan are running your SOGs, and Dylan's kind of being more of a flex. And then it was kind of an interesting situation because Tommy was the hardcore Maddox player, but then you take a look at the AR line, and there's a lot of question marks because Shawnee and Wuskin have been going back and forth, Shawnee mostly using the KN, while Wuskin will mostly use the ICR, but there have been instances where Shawnee will play ICR and Wuskin will run a Maddox, and there's times where Shawnee will run a Maddox. It's all over the place in the AR line. So when Denz comes into this mix, you figure he's going to have to run more of a hardcore Maddox role like Tommy did, but my biggest question mark is, what are you going to do with Shawnee and Wuskin? One of them needs to decide what role they're going to be playing, and they need to show up in a big way. Shawnee and Wuskin have not been having the best statistics in the world. They do sit right in the mix with everybody else in Reciprocity as far as the average KD, sitting at a .96 and a .98 for Wusky and Shawnee respectively. It's right in the middle of the pack. Dylan's the one who's the front runner on this squad. But you take a look at things like what's been going wrong for them, and you wonder, is it just an identity crisis thing, or are there some things that we can start to really take a look at and consider as far as potential swaps in the future? The biggest question mark comes down to, who else do you potentially get? You know, Denz, I think, will be a pretty solid addition. I don't think he's going to be any more or less solid than Tommy's been. Again, I hate to kind of talk down on Tommy because he is such a lovable guy, but the fact of the matter is, he has not been participating at the same level that he was back in Fort Worth. So you have to kind of keep that in mind that, yeah, this is a big hurt because he's a big kind of personality and obviously a leader for this team. But is his performance kind of holding them back a little bit? And I think a lot of people would sit there and say, well, actually kind of yes. We've been talking down on Shawnee a lot lately, but Tommy's stat lines in the last week of gameplay have not been very great either. He's been just about even in KD with Shawnee, which is typically he goes negative in the kill death department, which is not what you want to see from a Maddox player in a game where Maddoxes are super, super important. Now, Denz has been sitting on the bench for quite some time, so it makes you wonder, is this going to be the change that really Reciprocity needs? The good news, again, is the simple fact that you're going up against a weaker schedule if you're Reciprocity, and that's great, because you want to be able to go into this next week and be able to handle those games versus LG as well as UYU. You hope you can get a win versus Midnight, and then obviously you hope that you can match up versus Evil Geniuses as well. I think if you're looking at the longevity of this team, this upcoming week will really say a lot as far as what we need to look forward to them doing at Anaheim, and will we see any roster changes immediately after. That is the next important thing to keep in mind, is that there are no roster moves until just after Anaheim is when the next open RosterMania period will occur. Not a lot of options out there, to be honest, as far as who else is out there for potentially an AR specifically. I can't really think off the top of my head. There are too many that are just waiting in the wings, waiting to get picked up and potentially make a move and be a big dominating performer. Phantoms was my only real go-to as far as main AR players, and he's obviously been picked up and is doing very well for Evil Geniuses. So for Reciprocity, you need to find a way to make this work, I think, is the biggest thing. Maybe Tommy can be brought into more of a coaching role. You know, Shane is technically listed as their coach right now. Not really sure what kind of value he's bringing in. We don't really hear a lot from the coaching staff of Reciprocity, but you're hoping that Tommy might be able to step in and be more of a mentor and a leader and potentially kind of a coach for these guys. Give them a look, kind of let him take a step back, but also I'm sure he's going to want to stay involved. There's no way that living in a team house like this, he's just going to be completely AFK from the game for God knows how long. No, he's going to want to stay very active with this squad. So this very well could be what this team needs, is you have a very hungry person on the bench in Denz. You've got a guy who's getting a little burned out, needs some time for himself, but is very knowledgeable, very passionate about his team, as well as the brand itself and Reciprocity. And maybe he can sit down and actually start to help this team really move forward in a positive direction. The good news, again, is the simple fact that next week should be an easier week for them, considering you don't have to go up against the top 3 teams in Division A. My biggest question mark comes, will they get enough practice before they get into those tough matchups? Again, they've hit Midnight in their second game, and technically Luminosity is by no means a free game, you would think, because of how experienced Luminosity is. You're hoping that it would be if you're Reciprocity. You're hoping Luminosity doesn't figure their stuff out over the weekend before they come back in on Monday. But for UYU, you think that's a game that you need to win. I would say you need to win games versus Luminosity and UYU. It would be nice to win the games versus Midnight and Evil Geniuses. It would be great to go 3-1 on the week, I think, if you're looking forward to this. And you've got some room to really work with. I think that obviously Denz staying warm in the wings will mean that he can instantly come in. I think he's going to play very aggressively like Dylan likes to do. That's what we saw when, you think back to Fort Worth as I wrap this up. It was Tommy and Dylan playing very aggressively, and it was paying off for them. Now you're going to be able to get Denz in the mix, who's hungry, ready to go, and hopefully he comes with that same kind of thirst and hunger that we saw from this Reciprocity team at Fort Worth, and maybe all of a sudden this team can be very explosive. You kind of have a feeling that Wuskin and Shawnee are more of a responsive type of game player, where it's, all right, my team's playing aggressively, I'll play aggressively. It just feels like when they're the ones making the decisions, it doesn't really pay off for them. A lot of lost 1v1s by both of those players in the last couple of weeks. Hopefully this will be a new identity for Reciprocity. Hopefully with Denz moving in, he'll bring a little bit of extra fire and passion that might recharge this group a bit. And who knows? Again, I'm hoping that Tommy stays involved, and I hope that we see him up there with a headset running more of a coach style role, because I think he would bring a lot of value and overhead ideas to this team that has been struggling really since the termination of Fort Worth. So just a little bit of a news update there. No more Tommy. It will be Denz in instead. Expecting that for Monday. Again, keep that in mind for betting things. And speaking of next week, going to showcase a little bit of fun that I've got coming up for you guys. A new betting showcase for all of you guys that are interested in betting. This is the bookie's worst nightmare. I love this logo design. It's a lot of fun. We will be taking a look at these teams as far as not just how they meet up in the head-to-head, but also what they look like as far as their averages. I'll be doing a more specific breakdown, and I'll be taking a look at what the match lines are, what the spread lines are, and if this is a safe bet that you could potentially parlay, or how exactly I'm going to be thinking about betting this to give you guys the best chance at potentially winning some cash. Very excited about the bookie's worst nightmare segment of the show, so hopefully you guys enjoy it as well. Until next time, though, keep your eye out for the power rankings coming up here soon. Till then, hope you keep holding it down. So long.